Welcome to Cabinet today on Tuesday the 5th of November 2024. Item 1 on the agenda is attendance, so welcome everybody. I believe everyone is here in terms of Cabinet members, so there are no apologies for absence at item number 2, which brings us on to item number 3, which is declarations of interest. Anything to note here, Justine?
Thank you very much, Leader. Agenda item 6 and 7 mentions consultees and stakeholders. At page 29, there's a list of interested parties. So if you're a member of one of these groups, then you, and especially if you were nominated by the council, then you'll have a personal interest. So if you could consider those and make any declarations, alternatively members, if through conversations, discussions, you think that there's a declaration, please raise it at that particular time.
Justine, anything to raise, members? No. If we're happy, then we can move on to item 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes from the Cabinet meeting on the 8th of October of this year. Any matters arising there? No. Is everyone happy with those that are an accurate record? Yep. No objections. That's great. So on to item 5 then, which is updates on actions. I'm pleased to report there are no outstanding actions on the paper there. Anything anyone wants to raise on that? No? Okay, before we move to the first agenda item, I know there's been news today of Torfaen Estyn inspection report, a very positive report, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to Richard and all the officers who played a part across the council on that report. And we know that it's just a staging post in our improvement journey. It's not job done for us, but it is good to hear from that outside inspector of the improvements that have been made, because that will make a real difference to our schools and to our young people. So I'd just like to thank you to everyone who's played a part in that, including scrutiny members. But I know Cabinet members across the council and officers across the council have worked really hard on that report. So to Stephen, Jason, Andrew and everyone who's played a part in that, a big thank you. So that brings us to agenda item 6, which is the public space protection orders for dog controls. And I'll hand over initially to Mandy.
Thank you, Leader. This report relates to a review that has been undertaken on the Public Spaces Protection Order, known as PSPO, which puts place rules for dog controls in Torfaen. The existing PSPO creates offences for failing to remove dog faeces from any land in Torfaen to which the public has access, allowing a dog to roam without a lead in specified areas and allowing a dog to enter certain areas where an exclusion applies. PSPOs provide a tool to enable councils to manage the antisocial impact of irresponsible dog owners and to help keep areas safe and clean. The law under which PSPOs are created requires that they are reviewed every 3 years. The existing PSPO for dog controls has become due for review. The report outlines the outcome of a review into whether the PSPO remains relevant and effective and comprised of public consultation. I'll now hand over to John Clements, Housing Safety and Environmental Protection Manager, to present the report and to share the findings of the consultation exercise and the action proposed to address the comments received. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Councillor. So the purpose of the report is to inform Cabinet the findings of the review of the Public Spaces Protection Order, PSPO for dog controls in Torfaen, and to seek a decision from you on whether to extend, to vary or discharge the existing order. The key messages in the report are that the PSPO for dog controls made in 2022 have been reviewed in accordance with statutory requirements. The review sought to evaluate the effectiveness and the impact of the PSPO in addressing antisocial behaviour caused by irresponsible dog ownership, to recommend a decision on whether to extend, vary or discharge the order. A consultation exercise involving statutory consultees, interested parties and the wider community has been carried out to inform the review. The PSPO has been found to provide a proportionate response to deal with dog control issues and to be a useful tool to assist in delivering important objectives in the Council's county plan. However, practical matters such as effective enforcement and signage have presented challenges. Just to give you a bit of a breakdown in terms of the statutory consultation and the findings of that. So the survey was published on the Council's website on the 26th of May this year, and it ran for over 4 weeks. A high-level summary of the survey findings is provided in the report and in the appendices. 80.3% were in favour of retaining the dog exclusion orders, dog exclusion areas, 83.9% in favour of retaining the dogs on leads areas. 68.6% didn't feel that the PSPO was appropriately enforced, and 58% didn't feel that the PSPO was enough of a deterrent. Several respondents said they would like further dog exclusions and dogs on lead areas included in the PSPO, whilst fewer respondents said they would like more dog-friendly spaces. So there was a balance between dog-friendly dog owners wanting certain aspects and those wanting more exclusions and more restrictions for dogs. The overall findings are similar to that of the previous consultation 3 years ago, namely that there is a perception that the existing PSPO is not robustly enforced. The highest number of requests for additional dogs on leads areas was in relation to the canal towpath, followed by Pontypool Park, and then the cycle paths. The highest number of requests for additional dog exclusion areas was in relation to the canal towpath, followed by Pontypool Park. There were 8 requests for more dog waste bins and 6 requests for better signage. As I say, the data and anonymised comments from the survey are available at Appendix 4 and 5 of the report. So the civil enforcement team are responsible for enforcing the PSPO for dog controls in Torvine, and the environmental operations team respond to requests to remove dog faeces from public land. The data on enforcement activity and the data on complaints about dog fouling over the past 3 years are provided in Appendix 6. It is understood that Torvine is one of only 2 councils in Wales whose civil enforcement officers carry out a dual role of parking and environmental enforcement. Whilst officers, for example, at the Vale of Glamorgan Council enforce parking and environmental contraventions, they do so under a different model, whereby they are tasked to enforce either environmental or parking restrictions. So a review of existing arrangements is currently underway, and alternative enforcement models are being considered. And this work is expected to conclude within 12 months and will be presented to members thereafter. So the view is to take a bigger picture look at how we regulate for these offences, clean neighbourhood offences, dog fouling, littering, waste, so to bring in the waste type offences as well, and perhaps to think about having all of those put under one umbrella, for example, could be a model that could be considered in terms of getting effective enforcement for these clean neighbourhood offences. Civil enforcement officers currently patrol areas in response to complaints to provide a visual deterrent, and in some instances warning stickers have been placed on lamp columns in certain areas to warn that officers are patrolling and that anyone caught failing to remove dog faeces could be issued with an FPN. In terms of the options available, the first option is the Cabinet decides to extend the existing PSPO for another 3 years. Officers would continue to monitor compliance and the financial implications would remain unaffected. The second option is that we decide to discharge the PSPO for dog controls and not continue with it. If we didn't have a PSPO in place, we would have limited powers to deal with dog control issues and their associated impacts. And this could pose a greater risk to public health and safety and nuisance from a possible increase in the presence of dog faeces on public land and dog owners failing to keep their dogs under control in areas where restrictions currently apply. So there is a deterrent effect implicit in having the PSPO in place. The financial implications could be considerable, as the Council may incur the cost of removing and recycling and disposing of existing signage and making good any groundworks, etc. Additional costs could also be incurred in responding to the likely increase in requests to remove dog faeces from public land. There are also reputational and potential litigation risks associated with discharging the PSPO. The third option is to vary the PSPO for dog controls, and the decision to vary it would need to be based on the findings of the review. The responses to the public consultation survey were similar to previous feedback, such as increasing the scope of the PSPO to include additional dog controls on the Canal Towpath and Pontypool Park. There would be increased resource implications to implement variations to the existing PSPO, and the extent of which would depend on the additional restrictions imposed. In terms of the officer assessment, it's considered that the existing PSPO does strike a balance between the needs and the desires of all interested parties and the wider community. However, there is obvious benefit in including new marked sports pitches and new children's play areas to protect public health and safety and the environment. Due to the potential impact on residents of introducing additional dog exclusion and dogs on leads areas, the suggestions received require further consideration, and officers will undertake an exercise in 22526 to assess the potential impacts of the proposals as appropriate to inform any recommendations for future restrictions. It is recommended that Cabinet approve a variation to the existing PSPO for dog controls in Torvine to exclude dogs from any marked sports pitches and children's play areas on public land that had been developed since November 2021. And also they agreed to the Public Protection Service exploring and assessing the impacts of suggestions received from the public consultation to introduce additional dog controls in Torvine and to report the findings to the Executive Member for Environment for consideration.
Thank you. Any questions, colleagues? Fiona?
Thank you for the report. I'm not at all against renewing the orders. I do think they do serve as a reassurance, and I hear all the legal elements that you've highlighted as well, but I'm a bit concerned about how it says in the appendices that over the last 3 years we've had 2 fines. I've also anecdotally understood that we don't just do fines, but that's not in the report. We also have been known to give warnings, but it's essentially what I'm asking is how do we measure how effective this policy is if we've actually not delivered that many fines at all?
I think I'd probably have to ask perhaps Mark or somebody to comment on that aspect, because it's the civil enforcement team that enforce that.
Thank you. Yeah. I think this parallels here with the civil park enforcement operation as well, is where our officers are visible. People tend to comply. Where they're not, then obviously they relapse into their old habits. Officers are patrolling areas where so just to recap quickly, parallels with civil park enforcement in terms of where officers are present, people do comply. Where they're not, then there's a relapse in terms of behaviour. So it's difficult to catch these people. I think that's the reason why there's such a low level in terms of enforcement. But the visual deterrent is something that we do undertake. And we are patrolling areas where there are reports of dog fouling, and obviously where we can onto sports pitches as well, because we know the importance of keeping those areas clear as well. So that's the challenge that we have in terms of looking at the raw data of enforcement. But we are looking, as colleagues have said, in terms of reviewing that operation as well going forward, to have as a review of the sort of the wider environmental enforcement capabilities within the council.
We're probably going to keep hogging this for a bit. Okay, appreciate that. I also think, now have I understood it correctly, that it hasn't been a full team until relatively recently? There was, because you've got 3 years of numbers there, and I know that when I as a councillor was asking for my area to be managed in terms of car parking, one of the feedback issues was. So I can understand that perhaps, because obviously you need to have 2 members of the team, and I think you've only got a team of 4, so I get that. And I also understand, I think the industry calls it the golden ticket, actually catching somebody allowing their dogs to foul or dog to foul and then walking off. That's what the industry, I was told years ago, call it, because it's really challenging once you see people in uniform, you walk away, or you make sure that you do behave the way that you appropriately should. So I appreciate all those challenges. I think the concern I've got is that the vast part of this report, it focuses on the consultation, and it's the raising of expectations. And that's the bit that, you know, we're saying that we've given out to over 3 years, but the consultation is asking essentially for more. And I just want to make it so that the public that will be reading this, that would be reviewing the whole of this report and anything that's been said, is that we do understand as a council there's a challenge, that there is a review going ahead, but that people's expectations probably need to be measured, balanced, and is that fair to say, so that we're not raising expectations at this point? And the only reason this report is coming now is because of the timing, because it's expiring in 3 years. Have I understood all that correctly?
Yeah, the 3-year cycle is up now,
Yeah.
so it's due for review.
I just wanted to make sure those parts were brought out. I'd also like to add that I do very much support the new spaces being brought in as being considered, the new ones that we've got, and specifically the canal, because I know that that is an area for a lot of us that will have walked along and seen it as an issue. And the addition, I think, might be in the canal strategy, the addition of bins along that space as well, which would all help people to do their part as a community. But I think that's all my questions, so I won't help the mic as much as I thought I would. Thank you.
Sue?
Yes, thank you for the report, and just a word for all the responsible dog owners out there as well. We know that there are many, probably the majority of dog owners who are completely responsible about this. I was struck by Mark saying how difficult it is to actually catch people who are not clearing up after their dogs. And I am aware that there are some areas where fines can actually be issued for failing to have about you the means to clean up after your dog. I think that would be a really helpful thing for us to look at while we're reviewing, because ensuring that people always go equipped to clean up after their dogs is something much more easy to check. They do have that equipment with them, or they don't. So I'd be really keen to see that included in the review, and I think it might be really interesting for Cabinet to see the response to that review as well.
Thank you for that report, John. A thought that's just struck me during my equalities brief, in terms of blind and partially sighted people, particularly those with assistance dogs, do we make exemptions for them? Thank you.
Sorry, yes, we do. There are exemptions.
Good, thank you.
Great, thanks. Obviously, this is an issue that sort of creates a lot of sort of emotive feeling. You know, Sue's quite right. The majority of dog owners are very responsible and pick up after themselves, but those who don't, it does have consequences if it's outside people's houses. As a junior football coach, you know, I have to scan the field every time we play to make sure, you know, because sometimes when I go and do pitch inspections in the early morning, and when it's been raining a bit, you'll find some people just sitting in their cars, letting their dogs run around an area that's used as football pitches, and who knows where they've gone then. So it's obviously, especially playing rugby, if someone sort of falls and it's, you know, dog poo can, you know, have, you know, serious consequences, especially for young people. And people have gone blind before with dog poo getting in their eyes and stuff. So yeah, welcome the report, and yeah, look forward to anything we can do. Although I recognise the limitations on enforcement, we can't follow everyone around all the time. Neither would we want to. At the same time, I guess our plea is for people to follow the example of those responsible dog walkers and clean up after their animals when they're out walking them. Are we happy then to move to the recommendations? Paragraph 8.1 is recommended that Cabinet approve variation to the existing public spaces protection order for dog controls in Torvine to exclude dogs from any marked sports pitches and children's play areas on public land that have been developed since November 2021. And secondly, agree to the Public Protection Service exploring and assessing the impacts of suggestions received from the public consultation to introduce additional dog controls in Torvine and to report the finding to the Executive Member for Environment, that's Mandy, for consideration. Are we all happy with that? That's carried unanimously. Thank you to officers for their work on this. Okay, that means we move to agenda item number 7, which is the local area energy plan, and I'll hand over to Sue.
Thank you, Leader. Struck this morning as I was thinking about this report that we've been subjected to media headlines again about the catastrophic flooding in Spain, just one in a relentless tide of stories that bear witness to the nature and climate crisis that this planet, this nation of Wales and this borough of Torfaen are all facing. And councils, along with other public bodies in Wales, have a duty to improve long-term well-being and to protect our planet through the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And importantly, we have a clear obligation to protect future generations from these effects of pollution and climate change. We won't be able to do this unless we work in a planned way with others to respond to the climate emergency. And as far as our own role is concerned, as well as decarbonising our own estates and activities, we have an important role to play supporting the borough's wider net zero journey. Because key sources of emissions in the borough don't just come from council activities, they come from homes, from transport and businesses, and everyone has a part to play in this collective challenge. The context is in Wales that Welsh Government has funded something called Local Area Energy Plans, LAEPs or LEAPs as we describe them, for each council area. And the Torfaen Local Area Energy Plan sets out the challenge of how we transition our energy systems and our energy use to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And the plan identifies some of the initial steps that need to be taken, not just by us, but by key stakeholders. So the report sets out this position based on modelling and analysis that have been based on standardised guidance by the consultants that have worked with us, Energy Systems, Catapult, I believe, ESC. And they inform the LEAP's short to mid-term action plan for 2024 to 2030. They don't at this stage set definitive targets for 2050. And each local authority's LEAP will be aggregated together to inform a national energy plan. So what the council will be responsible for are a number of local actions, but also critically supporting the regional and the national actions. Some of this we can deliver within our existing resources, but we will need to be reassessing and reevaluating resource implications as the plan matures. So at local, regional and national level, this plan and the plans that sit around it set out the challenges and indeed the opportunities that are ahead of us in relation to energy, as we currently see them. But we know this is a rapidly moving context, and technological change and new solutions are always developing. So we're maintaining within the plan the flexibility to respond to those developments. There's an awful lot to do, and transforming our approach to energy can seem very daunting, but we are already making progress in all aspects of tackling the climate and major emergency. From recycling to green energy, from insulation to active travel, we all have a stake in the outcomes. This council takes its leadership role very seriously. We cannot and we will not slacken our efforts. I'm confident that working together we can transform how energy is consumed and generated, and most importantly, and this is a plea as a grandmother, help protect our grandchildren and their grandchildren from the dreadful effects of pollution and climate change. I'm going to hand to Graham now, to Mark initially, to take us through the detail of this very detailed work. Thank you.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Morgan's comprehensive introduction, I'll just cover the key salient points here, really. So, the purpose of the report, as Councillor Morgan has said, really, is for Cabinet to note Torfaen's LEAP, Local Area Energy Plan, and to endorse the actions set out in the LEAP's short to medium-term action plan, which stretches from 2024 to 2030. As Councillor Morgan has said, the Welsh Government funded the production of the LEAP for every local authority in Wales. Although prepared separately, these local area energy plans are lines to inform regional action and will form part of the National Energy Plan for Wales. Scope of the LEAP is the supply, distribution and consumption of energy within Torfaen's boundaries, and that's a consistent approach taken across Wales. The plan includes sort of three main objectives. It's an overview of Torfaen's current energy system. Secondly, a range of future scenarios for net zero local energy systems. And thirdly, a short and medium term action plan to ensure early progress is made in facilitating the eventual net zero energy system. There are sort of 5 proposals for Torfaen's future energy systems. So they are, number 1, improving energy efficiency of existing buildings, and members will be aware that we are making good progress internally with in Torfaen County Borough Council with regard to that. Decarbonising transport, again, there's work already in train within Torfaen County Borough Council looking at how we can decarbonise our own fleet. Decarbonising energy, Gwen's officers are already working with the local industry in terms of that, and there's been some good progress made recently with regards to that. Deploying onshore renewables and reinforcing and transitioning energy networks. So under each proposal will be short and medium-term action plans that have been identified and set out within the LEAPS action plan. As Councillor Morgan has said, there are 68 actions set out in the plan. Really, 20 of those action plans are reset at the door of Torfaen to progress, and we're already making progress, initial progress on those 20 areas as well. And as I say, they're already incorporated in the Council's Climate and Nature Emergency Programme, which has been shared with scrutiny recently as well. So, consultation has been developed, the LEAPS developed collaboratively. A series of stakeholder workshops has been held with key organisations and individuals that are identified as key contributors in terms of understanding and influencing Torfaen's energy systems. The implications under sort of section 6. Many of the local actions are already underway, as we've mentioned, and will be delivered with existing resources and funding, including external funding. However, we will need to reassess resource implications as the plan matures and the actions develop, and hence the reason why the long-term actions have yet to be formed, and they will be considered as the plan progresses. So, as I say, existing scopes will widen and regional national initiatives are being brought forward. One of those issues, I suppose, is the emerging technology of hydrogen and how that will impact both in terms of our energy systems and our transport systems as well. That's officers working closely with sort of national providers and regionally as well to understand how that will transition into the energy system. And each of these will be considered on a case-by-case basis, with the action only taken forward once the required resources are in place. Therefore, the suggested actions are that Torfaen's LEAP is published, and that subject to resources, officers begin to deliver the actions set out for the Council in the LEAP's short and mid-term action plan, again, which stretches from 24 to 2030. Thank you.
Any questions, colleagues? No, it's welcome this report, really. It's important that we do have the energy plan to direct our efforts to become more sustainable. I know the climate emergency is sometimes frustrating, sometimes inconvenient, and sometimes costly, and involves spending money on things, in an ideal world we'd rather spend on other things, but it's, not something we can just leave to be someone else's responsibility. I think it's incumbent on all levels of government across the world to do what we can to play our part in becoming more sustainable and avoiding the kind of scenes, as Sue said, that we're seeing increasingly from Spain to so many other places of dramatic climate catastrophes that only get worse and more frequent as climate change progresses. Are we all okay to agree the recommendations then? Paragraph 8.1. Those recommendations are agreed. Thank you for the report. That brings us to agenda item 8, which is the annual complaints report. And if I bring in Peter initially here.
Thank you, Leader. The report sets out an overview of the annual complaints performance and also presents the Public Service Ombudsman annual letter for Cabinet to note. I briefly want to set out the key headlines from what I believe to be a very positive report. Members may have noted the increase in complaints from 160 in 2022-23 to 248 in 2023-24. By and large, this can be attributed to a review of how contacts are categorised as complaints. The review was completed midway through 2022-23. This report is the first to fully reflect these changes, so it's difficult for you to make year-on-year comparisons. We undertook and implemented the review to ensure, as a council, we're able to strengthen accountability and transparency for residents across the council's complaints process. The team was also notified of 155 compliments across the authority, an increase from the 110 from the previous year, which is good news. With regard to the number of complaints escalated to the Ombudsman for Wales, we are pleased to note they decreased from 18 to 14. Only 6% of complaints made to the authority went on to the Ombudsman, compared to 11% the previous year. We also achieved the lowest rate of complainants contacting the Ombudsman at 0.15% per 1,000 complaints. Given the increase in the number of complaints, this indicates that our processes are robust and effective in final resolution. A copy of this report was presented to the Governance and Audit Committee on the 3rd of October 2024 in line with the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, which gives the committee a defined assurance role around complaints. The committee raised no concerns and I attended that meeting. The corporate complaints team will continue to work closely with the Ombudsman's office and colleagues to ensure that complaints are handled effectively and provide valuable insights and learning. I'm joined by Chris Corton, the Council's complaints team leader, who will provide a little more detail on some of these key points within this report. Before Chris starts speaking, I'd just like to put on record my thanks to him and his team for all the work they do on this agenda. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. So, as Councillor Jones said, the report is the annual overview of our performance for the previous year. So, Councillor Jones has captured the main points that are contained within that report. So, it is the first full year to reflect the updated way that we categorise the complaints that are come through into the authority. So, you'll see there's been an increase in the contacts overall. I think that's a positive as well, in that people are contacting us and knowing where we are and where we sit and what we do. And then it's for us then to manage those contacts and be able to deal with those effectively. Despite the increase, we still managed to exceed our 95% response target, so overall performance was at 96.2%. That's not all down to us. We're just a small team. Obviously, we work closely then with the departments across the authority to deal with both the corporate social care complaints and the FOI and the IR requests. So it's the engagement of the officers and departments really that help then to contribute to the effective outcomes that we're able to deliver. So we appreciate the time that they invest in helping us to resolve the issues and identify the improvements and lessons. So as Councillor Jones highlighted, the one area that did decrease was a number of complaints that went on to the Ombudsman. So we did see a drop despite the elevated number of complaints we record. There was a decrease in the number that then went on to the Ombudsman as the final step in the complaints processes. So I think we take that as a positive reflection then of the complaints resolution and handling processes that we have. Again, there was the increase in the compliments that came through, which is a positive balance and shows departments what is going well, in contrast to what isn't going well from the complaints that come through. So we just encourage managers, officers to make us aware as and when they are fed in to departments so that we can log those and present those in the report also. So going forward, we'll carry on working with the departments and teams to increase our abilities to learn from the complaints that come through, and also to improve our accessibility. We're going to be looking at some basic literature that we can put out for the public to access, so they have access or information on how to raise those complaints to us. And from a staffing perspective, we also want to raise the awareness among staff as to the processes and where we are and what we do. So we'll be looking at some options around potential e-learning packages that can be rolled out across the authority then. So just thank you for your time and welcome any questions.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you for the way that you and your team lead this, both as a team dealing with complaints and the way that we try and use every complaint as a learning experience to help improve what we do as a council. It's really valued across the council, I know, so thank you for that. Any questions, colleagues, on the reports? If not, the recommendations are is that Cabinet's invited to note the information presented in this report and agree to continue to support the Central Complaints and FOI team. Cabinet's also invited to note and provide any comments in relation to the annual letter from the Public Service Ombudsman. So we're happy to agree the reports. Great, and thank you for your work on the report and your work across the year in the complaints team. It's much appreciated. Thanks. Right, that brings Cabinet today to a close, colleagues. Thank you, everyone, and speak to you again soon.